Hello and welcome to Paragon Replicas. I'm Mike, and today I'm going to be showing you how I built this custom 3D printed Mandalorian helmet. So this is the raw print, and as you can see I'm just taking some 220 grit sandpaper and giving the entire thing a pass with this 220 grit sandpaper. This is going to start to smooth out these print lines or build lines, whatever you prefer to call them. When you 3D print anything, you get these build lines going across the Z-axis on your model, and we want to try to eliminate all of those. And I'm trying to sand against the grain of the 3D print, so to speak. So I'm trying to sand against these print lines and not with them. And I'm just generally trying to smooth out as much as I can with this 220 grit. Next, I'm going to pull out some X-Acto knives to cut off these extra bits that are imperfections from the printing process. This is printed in PETG, so there's a little bit more sagging and drooping as opposed to PLA, which is more common. Next, I'm going to grab out my file, and this will be very helpful in getting into the T-Visor. This is really hard to sand down with sandpaper because I can't really get my fingers in there so well. That file is going to knock back a lot of material very quickly for us. Looks about ready for a coat of filler primer, so that's what I'm going to hit it with. This is a self-leveling primer. This will help to start fill in those gaps. This stuff is designed to fill in cracks and crevices to give you a more even finish. It's also sandable, which means we can sand this back to further smooth out the helmet. I'm trying to go for a medium coat, a little bit more on the heavy side, because if I get any drips, it doesn't matter too much because I'm going to sand this layer back anyway. Now that this is all dry after a few hours, I'm going to attack it again with some more 220 grit. Here you can see a passive 220 grit with filler primer over it, and on the other side I sanded it back some more with 220, and it's starting to even out. We give the whole thing another round of sanding the same way we did it in the first round. Now that you have a substance to sand back, it's going to start to even out much faster than when we were just sanding the raw print. You really don't want to miss any spots, even if they're hard to get. You really want to try to smooth out as much of the surface as you can. Sometimes I fold the sandpaper, sometimes I wrap the sandpaper around objects to get into little spots. Now's a pretty good time to add some Bondo. This material fills in seams. It's a thicker filler, it's similar to filler primer, but this is a paste that you can spread around the model to fill in more egregious imperfections. As you can see, I'm just applying it with my fingers to areas that need a lot more attention than filler primer can provide. Notably the top of the helmet, where the helmet starts to get rounder and rounder, which is more and more difficult for 3D printers to achieve. I'm also getting under the cheeks, where there was a bit of an overhang, so they weren't as smooth as I wanted them. A little bit on this mandible section here that didn't turn out quite how I wanted, and inside of the T-Visor. There's a lot of support material in there, and I want to make sure to get that smooth as well. I'm also hitting the bottom of the helmet. The support material was touching the bottom of the helmet along with a raft, so it's pretty rough on the bottom as it sits. I'm going to let that cure for a little bit, and I'm just testing it with my fingers to see if it's cure, and it is, so I'm going to go ahead and start sanding this layer back, again with some more 220 grit sandpaper. With Bondo or another body filler, you're going to basically want to sand most of it off. You only want it to remain in the deep crevices and divots in your part. Getting in this T-visor was a little bit difficult, so I wrapped some sandpaper around a file, and I'm sanding it out like that. The rest of the helmet was pretty simple. There's not too many divots to really have to cram sandpaper into. We're gonna take this helmet back over to my little paint area, and we're gonna hit it with some more primer, but this time just normal primer. I'm gonna use this maroon color. I'm gonna give this just an even coat. I'm not gonna go very heavy on it. Mostly what I'm doing here is trying to make the helmet just one uniform color again. I like this red color because it contrasts well with the gray, and you'll see why this is important in a second. After this is all dry, I'm going to take this Sharpie and mark which areas just need a little bit more attention. So on this little mandible is a bit rough. The top of the helmet where the printer had some trouble printing that round surface, I'm going to mark that. Under the cheeks still are a little bit imperfect, so I'm going to mark off those areas. And this is just to help guide me what I need to sand back. And I'm just hitting this again with another round of 220 grit sandpaper. As I start to sand this red, you can see I'm peeling back the red and revealing the gray that is under. This helps me understand how smooth the model is becoming. Because if I sand that red back to gray, I have a pretty good idea that that is completely smooth now. The contrasting colors gives you a really good sense of high spots and low spots, which is important in getting a smooth finish, especially for something that you're going to make bright chrome or silver or any type of metallic color. Here I'm just using my fingers to try to confirm that I've smoothed out sections or not. Your fingers are much better at telling you if something is smooth or not, so I would rely on those rather than your eyes. Here I'm hitting it again with some filler primer, alternating to another gray color, but I can tell that I also just need a little bit more substance to fill in some of these print lines and more rough areas. Here I'm taking a file and revealing these marks that I had created in ZBrush when I created this 3D model on my computer. These got hidden with the filler primer and primer coats, so I'm just taking a little file to reveal these little details and scratches that I had added. Off camera, I sanded this to a 400 grit, and now we're going to do the final pass with 1500 grit. I'm using a method creatively called wet sanding, and this mechanically gives you a smoother finish. Since this is going to be the last pass of sanding, I'm just doing this to get a little bit extra finish out of the part. I'm going to rinse this helmet off and then get a cup of warm water so I can submerge a can of spray paint in. Well, I'm going to get a little bit less water and submerge a can of spray paint into there. This is a great primer. It's called Chaos Black from Citadel. It's used for models, so it sticks to strange plastic things very well, and it gives you a very, very, very clean finish. Once that's dry, I'm going to hit it with a black gloss coat. After a few hours, that black gloss is going to be nice and dry and extremely glossy. To get a nice Beskar finish, I'm going to be using Allclad 2's Chrome Lacquer. This is ran through an airbrush, and as you can see, the very high gloss black base coat is going to really bring out a chrome finish on this helmet. I love this paint. I use it for most things that need to be metal looking. However, it is a very delicate paint. It will rub off over time with just your fingers, so we have to protect it with something. And this is a product I'm going to use from Allclad as well, called Clear Coat. And after the chrome has dried, I am spraying the entire helmet with this sealer. This will unfortunately dull the finish ever so slightly, but it's better than rubbing off the chrome finish altogether. And after that has dried, we have a very shiny Beskar helmet. Putting that off to the side, we do need to make the visor. I have a piece of acrylic here. I forget exactly what the thickness is, but it's a substantial piece. And with some calipers here, I'm just taking down some rough measurements, as well as using a measuring tape to also get some rough measurements. Giving myself some extra room to work with because I can always take away more material later. It's always good to overestimate how much material you need. Using just the back of this paper on this piece of acrylic, I'm just marking out the areas I need to cut. Just drawing off a rough T and then Xing out the areas I don't need. This will be on the inside of the helmet, so it doesn't matter too much if these arcs aren't symmetrical. I'm going to simply cut it out on my bandsaw, which has a metal blade installed. This is good for cutting plastics and, of course, metal. It is a bit difficult to get inside of these arcs that I've drawn, so I'm actually going to use a Dremel with a cutoff wheel to get through the rest of that material. Please don't use this setup that I'm using. I don't have a better way to do this, and it's not the safest thing to do. After I've roughly cut that out, I'm just going to start to heat form this into a curve. So I'm just warming up the surface and slowly pushing on the material. But as you can see, I greatly underestimated how much heat was necessary to curve that piece of acrylic. Pulling out some patterning paper, this is just butcher paper, it's very useful. I'm going to quickly draw out a new pattern. While it's on paper, I can actually hold it up on the inside of the helmet to verify its shape. Just gonna cut it out on the bandsaw again. This visor also came out much cleaner than the first, so overall I'm actually satisfied that the first one broke. Here you can see I'm adding much more heat than I did last time, and working with it a little bit more gingerly. Just slowly kind of pushing on these little corners so I don't snap them off again. Let the tools and the heat and all of the physics that you're doing work for you, not against you. We all learn that the hard way at some point. I'm being careful not to add too much heat. I don't want any portions of this visor to sag. We're almost getting it into the final shape here. I'm just going to do a quick test fit. I can see that it fits, but I do need to cut off this extra portion on the bottom. Again, would not recommend doing this on a tiny anvil with a Dremel tool. Using just simple hot glue at high temp, I'm going to tack that in place. Using the same methods as I did for the whole helmet, I'm going to make this little earpod spike detail. I'm just going to rough up the surface and stick it down with some super glue. And there we are. A finished, custom, 3D printed Mandalorian helmet. If you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like, subscribing, commenting, or sharing with another Star Wars nerd you know. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.